Hi, my name's Kim Dunlop. I'm the next guest on the online prosperity show, and I'm looking forward to chatting with Prosper. And we're going to be delving into my business, which is around people development. I'm a development consultant and corporate facilitator, and I'm looking forward to bringing just ideas around owning your own leadership style or your communication, how you receive messages and how you deliver messages. So, Prosper and I are going to be unpacking a few things, but I'm very excited.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga, and I've got a question for you. Do you know that friend or person who somehow manages to stay calm in the middle of absolute chaos? And I know for sure, while the rest of us are running around like a haze on fire, our next guest is absolutely incredible at doing that. And I also want you to imagine that if this was your job, what would you be doing? Okay, today on the Online Prosperity Show, the number one place to find the hidden stories and breakthrough strategies behind Australia's most inspiring leaders. We're going to be talking to someone who helps business leaders not just survive pressure, but to actually master it. Now, Kim, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me, Prosper. So wonderful to be here.
Absolutely. Well, the pleasure is all mine. I can't wait to jump into what it is that you do and how you're bridging the gap to success for a lot of people. Now, for those that are tuning in for the very first time, this is the Online Prosperity Show. And our guest today is Kim Dunlop, who is the founder of Suits You. She has gone from a 17-year-old being told she'll never amount to anything to becoming a powerhouse facilitator who's termed the corporate sharks and now teaches leaders how to communicate with impact and also calm the storm within. We're going to be talking about not AI, but PI. So you want to be on the lookout for that, new tidbit of information. And she actually also helps those people lead their teams to greater heights. So in this episode, you're going to discover the emotional wiring that actually shapes the way you lead and why self-awareness beats any leadership manual out there, and also learning to save yourself first and how that can truly transform how you show up in life and in business. I don't know when the last time was when you took a flight. They always tell you in case of emergency. All right, you will discover what that entails as we go along. And trust me, there's a story also about a secretary not taking or talking to her just simply because she was too happy. Can you imagine that? Oh, you'd want to stick around for that story there. Now, Kim, I could go on and talk about things that I'm not even qualified to even start talking about. Take us a little bit back to that 17-year-old girl who heard her dad saying, hey, you'll never amount to anything, and how that moment actually lit a fire in you.
Yeah, it was really a defining moment, Prosper. And thank you for bringing that to the table. It was a real starting point for me. It was an emotional time. My parents were actually breaking up at the time. And my dad just shared some words. And you don't realize how powerful some words can actually be and how they land within our systems. And those words stayed with me for many years. And at the time, I was doing my HSC, and it was, a really tough time because when he projected these words onto me, it was like, oh, wow, I just failed my HSC. He was going through an emotional breakdown, but those words became very powerful in time to come. And so for me, at the time, it felt like I was powerless, but I became more powerful in understanding what those words meant. And it was an emotional piece which my dad was going through, and he was projecting it onto me. And so this work that I'm doing now is a product of that. And what I'm bringing to the world is how words can shape how we show up. And so that piece for me, Prosper, interjected me into the corporate world of real estate. And so I was 18 going into the corporate world after this, receiving this information, and thought, well, I'll prove something to my dad. I'll prove that I can be good enough, and I'll step into a world with, leaders who were 10, 20, 30 years my senior. And it was interesting because I kind of refer to that time as me being a dolphin as well as playing with some sharks. So I needed to adapt and I needed to work out how to pivot or change. And, shifting those, sort of personality traits was an interesting time for me.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Kim, for taking us back to that time. Now, obviously, having been told that by somebody we love and trust really takes away the confidence that we actually have. And that is akin to, being chased out of the clan. As human beings, we are societal beings. So can you maybe let us know or paint a picture of what life was like in the household prior to this? As a kid, what was it like growing up?
Yeah, I had a really fortunate childhood and very privileged in the sense. Lived in a nice area. We always had food on the table, and we had wonderful holidays. And growing up in a very loving family, so yeah, I had really great foundations, Prosper, really great foundations. But like anything, whether it's a role model like your parents or someone at school, we can get impacted by words and take that on. And so it might not have been personal to me at the time, but I took it on as being personal. And I then associated it with, the outcomes that I achieved, from not achieving, the results for my HSC, which was the highest school certificate, and failing that. So then combined with those words, you'll never amount to anything, it was kind of quite, a harsh sort of feeling. And so we then become quite judgmental on ourselves and go, well, I'm not good enough and I'll never be good enough. So how do I prove it? So what shifted for me was the pattern. And Prosper, what I then created was me constantly stepping in and giving. So proving and validating and having to do a lot of things. So the doing part of me became quite strong. And so I could take action. I had the, capacity to do a lot of tasks. So yeah, it was a really interesting turn of events. And so that's what I really noticed, how I stepped in so much.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you so much for clarifying that, because then what this incident shows us is it became a pattern break. I mean, everything had been hunky dory, and then all of a sudden, something popped into the scene that made you start to realize, wait a minute, this needs to change and I need to improve. Otherwise, these words will become true. Now, you've described it as you grew up, you became that dolphin swimming with sharks. What was it really like to be maybe in the corporate property world surrounded by men that were decades older than you were?
Yeah, it was a really interesting piece because now that I'm doing work in the leadership space, I'm supporting leaders to lead from greatness. But what I noticed by the patterning and my behaviors is I didn't have people around me who were necessarily wanting to hold my hands or to support me. So I was kind of swimming in a pool of sharks, with men who I do admire, because I admired the qualities, but it was very dog eat dog back then. So the corporate world was like commercial transactions. It was all about the commercial transactions. And everything was about time is money. And so it was a really interesting time because I was about relating as well. So balancing the whole relating and building relationships with people. But I had to learn to adapt to make sure that I was always watching my back, so to speak, Prosper, and, being mindful of that people were willing to take. So there was a lot of taking going on, and I was giving a lot. And so there was a massive imbalance for me. So I started to notice, because when I asked for support, it was not then received. So that's when kind of the tension, the energies, the emotions started to build up in me, which then relates to the work that I'm doing. So going back to what you shared at the beginning about calming the storm within, that storm was building up within me of emotions that were developing into frustration, anger, annoyance, because I was not receiving. But I had to always keep on fighting, keep on stepping in, and having to survive. And so there was all these aspects which were so unhealthy, of constantly having to, give to try and get my outcomes. So yeah, it was an interesting time.
Oh, absolutely. Now, would you maybe say that all of this was maybe happening because without realizing you were still looking for that, maybe not exactly in these words, but the approval, or like you said, you wanted to prove to your dad that you were able to do this? Was that now the thing that would have been fueling you to go through, because somebody else would have given up if they realized that maybe this wasn't really coming out well for them?
Definitely. Great question. There's definitely that piece of validation and proving, and having to step into that world, and probably picking the most challenging environment, Prosper, of going up against, guys who were 10, 20 or 30 years my senior. That was a massive challenge to
Mm.
do that. And in doing that, it was the awareness of realizing I felt like I still needed to prove something to them, prove something to myself that I can do it. So yeah, it was a massive piece for me.
Mm.
And it wasn't until later on that I realized that I didn't have the balance, the balance of the dolphin and the shark. So I started to morph into the shark more so, where it was like you had to protect your own area. You had to protect, what you developed. You had to constantly protect everything around you, because people, were not trustworthy. They were potentially going to take things from you. So yeah, there was that environment. So and it's not that it was bad. And when I say that, it was like they didn't know any different. They didn't know any different of what they were doing. It was just the environment, and it was very much commercially focused. So it was all about the numbers, you
Oh,
know?
I can imagine. I can imagine. And especially, in like you're saying, commercial property and things like that. Was there maybe a specific incident that made you realize that adapting quickly wasn't just helpful, it was actually survival? Because so many people would just go there and, look at things that are, and, not take it upon themselves to really adapt and, yeah, like you said, swim with the sharks.
Yeah, I think it's probably having a little bit of grit or resilience. Um, it's that ability to be really open minded, I would say. And going, there was part of my personality. I am aware of that, Prosper, that my personality is reflective of looking for challenges. So my personality was developed on that basis. And so I would always look for challenges to see if I can conquer those challenges. So it was also conquering that piece as well for myself equally, and proving that. Um, but yeah, I suppose it's really for anyone else, say, walking into that type of environment, it would be a case of knowing, are you open? Are you adaptable? Because you've got different perspectives or different people that you are coming across every day. And you've got to look at your strategy of what you're running and the strategy that you're running in order to get those outcomes. And so that's probably, how you step into something is probably one of the critical pieces. And knowing if you didn't get that outcome, how do you then repivot the next day? Because you might get a rejection. And so how do you get up and then go, well, that's just a learning piece for me. That's just feedback that the way that I delivered that or approached that is potentially not going to get me the outcomes. So how do I slightly change that?
Absolutely. And obviously, with time, you start realizing that in order for you to be able to save others or do anything for others that is meaningful, you actually have to start with yourself first. Like I did allude to that, putting your mask on first, in the introduction there. Was there maybe a slow build, or was there a lightning bolt moment that made you realize, wait a minute, I now have to start looking after numero uno?
I love that. Yeah, I think it's a phrase, Prosper, that people probably talk about quite flippantly, that, we need to look after ourselves in order to help someone else. And it's a really true statement. Um, and so I'd look at two things: boundaries. We start to either shift our boundaries, we start to become aware and going, okay, if someone's taking from me and I'm not getting anything in return, but I keep on giving, what do I need to change or shift within myself? And so that's an awareness piece that I looked at and did a lot of repivoting around that. But I wasn't really aware of my superpowers at that time. And the superpower was that ability to give and to acknowledge someone else. And so I was constantly acknowledging others. But at the time, I didn't realize that one of the gifts is to actually start with ourselves, to look at the style, to look at, acknowledging my own gifts and what it is that I was valuing, what were the qualities that I was bringing. And probably one of the biggest qualities that I was bringing was communication, friendliness, joy, and happiness. And so it was never, I never started with understanding or acknowledging myself, and looking at my leadership style, which was very open, very friendly, very compatible to a lot of people. And so, yeah, that was probably one of the biggest pieces. So it is looking at ourselves first. It is really acknowledging or taking ownership of our leadership style or our communication style, and then noticing that within another. So, yeah, and how we adapt to that. So that's probably, yeah.
I like that. It takes a lot of learning to reflect and see what it is that you are bringing to the table and the sort of feedback that you're getting. And I would think maybe when one realizes that they should take ownership of their actions and how they are showing up in the world, it makes life a whole lot easier. Now, I think one of your biggest breakthroughs was discovering that backing yourself was the way forward, in the way that you educated yourself, the way that you, learned all these softer skills other people would have given up. Is there a specific moment where this actually came true and you realized that I've actually made the right decision here?
Yeah, it's a great question. And having those soft skills, it was when a particular situation where I had to actually access a different role, Prosper. And I took on a dominant leader role where I realized that I needed to change and adapt because I was caring so much for people and caring about giving and supporting others that in return I was not receiving that. And so I would actually then share my voice in a way to actually match other leaders who were very dominant over me by saying it should be done this way, Kim. And I would step up to that tone or that positioning that they were holding, and I was able to match them on that tone and that delivery to actually really hold that sort of shark piece within and sort of say, no, I agree with your way, but I also equally want to actually bring in my way. So it was having that strength to shift that. And so that was probably the part, is knowing when to access a different part of us, because I had that within me, which was that strength that you pointed out. And being so nice can sometimes not turn out so nice. and so it's having that awareness that others are showing up with a bit of emotion, a bit of dominance, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it was just kind of bringing our voices to the table. And so that would probably be the one thing I'd like to share with people, is knowing to not marginalize your voice, but to bring it forward by actually, when you're so passionate about something, and about a belief that in a situation that you believe is also true, which creates that collaboration. So
Absolutely. You see, information changes situations. The more you sort of know about certain topics or about yourself, the more confident you become, especially when it comes to self-expression and, like you say, that whole communication and things of that nature. So you went on and you dug deep into neuroscience, psychology, and also emotional regulation. That kind of gave you an unfair advantage because now you had that information to be able to speak at the podium. But what was the most surprising thing that you learned about the human brain or human mind while you were, in this self-discovery phase?
I love that. I love how you said unfair advantage. And I really do appreciate that, because, Prosper, having too much knowledge can sometimes be quite dangerous. Because for me, when I share so much information, I've realized that it can sometimes overwhelm people's nervous systems. And they think that I'm actually really smart. And it's so funny, but I'm actually aware of people because I study people. And so that was the part. And so what I've learned to adapt as being a dolphin and a shark is adapting that piece. But probably one of the biggest things that I've learned through, writing reports and understanding the frameworks and the studies is that we're actually generally, as a society or as people, we're really hard on ourselves. We are so hard on ourselves, and we're not actually caring for ourselves. So we're so focused on success and outcomes and achievement that we're actually not balancing that with, say, experience or slowing down or, celebrating, say, lying on the lounge, watching a movie. We're not, because we're so hard. We feel like we have to be doing. And so there's that masculine energy of drive, drive, drive. Whereas if we were to balance it with, say, feminine energy, where we all have access to, we have access to masculine and feminine energy, and that's the receiving part, and actually caring for ourselves, to actually allow ourselves to be kind to ourselves and really just slow that down, to then be able to speed up. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having healthy goals and, wanting to achieve success in business. Like, there's nothing wrong with any of that. But I just think we're just so hard on ourselves. We're so judgmental. And so that's probably the biggest piece, is if we can balance that, and if we can actually start to understand why we are placing our energy out here, and if we are placing energy out here, Prosper, are we blaming others out here, or are we actually looking at ourselves and asking questions of ourselves and going, why am I feeling this way? Why am I in this situation? Because sometimes there's situations that happen for us and they're sometimes out of our control. And so how can we be resourceful in actually asking others for help and support? And that's probably one of the biggest things, is we're not asking questions. Like, I feel that this is a missing piece in the communication loop. And it's a real big piece that I want to bring forward is how can we ask the question like, I'm stuck. I'm stuck today. And it could be just something like, a situation with your child. It could be a relationship issue in business. It could be something to do with your partner. But all of this impacts us when we turn up for work. And so if we can look at how we could get unstuck and become powerful, not powerless to our problems, by not holding this blame out here, how could we ask little kind questions of ourselves? How could we ask someone else to support us? How could we ask the questions within to go, what is it I'd like to shift, or I don't know how to shift? Because we have so much information at our fingertips, Prosper, and yet we're not integrating it. And that's probably one of the biggest pieces that I want to really impact the world with, is helping people to integrate it, to actually shift that. And we can shift it really quickly by even just having a short 10-minute conversation. But it requires us to be responsible. It requires us to be responsible to actually want to shift it, because I feel that sometimes people do want to stay stuck, and I say that with a lot of care and kindness, you know.
Absolutely. And I'm going to say this, Kim, with a lot of love and respect. What you're fighting against is a school system. Hear me out. Because school, you're meant to know the answer and you're not supposed to fail.
Yeah.
And this is exactly what people then take on into their lives, because when the teacher asks you a question, you put your hand up and you're supposed to know the answer. You're not supposed to be asking what are we doing here today? And that alone is what has really been ingrained in a lot of people's heads, which means I should know this by now. That's why people fail, especially marriages, money, because they think I'm old enough, I should know this by now. But we're
Yeah.
here to learn. I don't know.
Oh, I love that. I love that. It really landed for me when you said that. And that's where the frameworks of the mind around the neuroscience is, we're holding those frames of mind in place, that we're potentially not bringing our voices forward, Prosper, to ask that question. And that was probably one of the biggest skills that I had from a very young age, because no one was teaching me. So I had to ask questions. So there was the pivot. There's the pattern being created, because I went, if I'm going to survive in this shark pit, I've got to ask questions. So I shifted that from school, straight stepping into the corporate real estate world by asking questions. And so now when I do that, sometimes I actually balance that by holding back and not asking the question and just sitting with that person. So there's a different dance sometimes where we can sit back, because if we do ask questions, sometimes some person their nervous system might feel a bit overwhelmed. So it's then reading those signs. We can then read those signs within an individual and going, is this the right time to ask the question? Is it the right time to deliver an answer? Are they asking me to give an answer? And this is where the dialogue and the communication could be richer. It could expand a bit more. But sometimes we're not actually asking the question of another. And therefore, we are sort of staying stuck in our own perspective. And we could expand our perspective by asking a question.
You see, and I feel like it's all systemic, the way it actually just all comes together. I don't know about you, but I'm working right now. And to another person, they might just be thinking this is a waste of time. I could be doing something productive. But if you really look at it, this is my work. This is my job, and whatever then happens after this. But for some other people who have not been taught in that format, are not going to see it in that way, because it's not going to be on the test. You see? So you didn't fail HSC. The system failed you. Now, how do you then help leaders to see the parts of themselves that they judge, that are often their natural superpowers, because fish don't see the water that they swim in?
Yeah. And I want to touch on something that you just shared, which I really love, is we're not taught it. And so when we see it, when we teach ourselves, we could then teach another. But rather than holding the frustration or the blame in another because they're not doing it the way you've been taught, we could actually look at helping and supporting or guiding and mentoring others in that way if we want to lead them. If we want to lead them. But I don't feel that that is being seen or heard because we're not owning that style or we're not appreciating or acknowledge it. And this is where it comes back to that point of we're so hard on ourselves. We're actually not acknowledging ourselves. We're not putting the mask on ourselves first and actually going, oh, that's a really lovely quality. I've actually compassionately asked someone, would they like to be taught? This is a skill that I have learnt. Would you like me to show you? And so I think that's a really key piece that you just shared, is we're judging others because we think that they should have been taught. And it's probably one of the biggest things that comes up in conversations, Prosper, is that piece. Oh, well, they should know it.
Yeah.
They should know it. And I go, well, they don't. And so if you can then teach them and open that up and then see how long it takes them to integrate that process, and it might take 2 or 3 times, or you might have to repivot, but we're not taking that time because we have become so busy. And so I appreciate that leaders, and so going on to your next question, I appreciate that leaders are, under a lot of stress. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of challenges. But if we were to master this piece around our emotional system, which is dialing down the emotions. So if we look at the collaboration breakdowns, the burnout, the stress, the frustration, the anger, the voice within us, if we could dial that down and actually calm that storm within and actually master that by also getting our needs met. And so it's constantly asking ourselves before we step into a meeting, what are my needs? And this is probably the business breakthrough that businesses could look at, is what are my needs? Before I plug into the business, what are my needs today? Do I want to change for that other person? Can I change? Because can I give to that other person? Or what do I need to give to myself? And who do I need to go and find that from? How can I go and get some support from someone else in order to be able to step into this meeting or to step into this negotiation that might be really challenging? What is the support that I need for myself?
Because that's just a simple step, when somebody can take, especially right now, and whoever's watching right now, it's just a simple step you can take today to really calm the storm within when the stress is high. What are my needs? And the one thing though, Kim, if we would walk together on the street right now,
Yeah.
so many people would tell you what they don't want, but they never tell you what they do want. And
Yes.
and I think that's one thing that a lot of people really need to have a grasp around. How important is it to really know exactly what you want?
Mm. And it goes back to that point that you made, that we were not taught that. We were not taught to ask for our needs to be met, to get clear on what it is we need for ourselves. And so I think that could be a society piece as well. If I ask, am I being selfish? If I ask, for what I need or who I am, or sharing that. And so I think that's probably the toughest thing, because you're spot on, Prosper, when you say people will tell you what they don't want. And so I would then turn around and say to them, so I haven't heard what it is you need. What is one thing that you need? And if I was to give you a magic wand, and you could get any of your needs met, what would it be? They still go into that, oh, well, I haven't got this and, I haven't got that. Okay, tell me what is it you need? And that's where I think our systems have been so conditioned for such a long time that what if someone did ask you that? Because it's that receiving part. And we were always pushing away, people who are going to give to us, but you're kind of denying others of giving to you, whereas you've been giving to them. So that's the polarity, which is quite funny in that
Mm.
way.
Oh yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And that means people really, once you know what you need, that means you now own how you show up, because then you're showing everybody else how you want to be treated and what would satisfy your person, you know. But how does that awareness change the way teams actually perform? Because then it doesn't that look or sound selfish to just the person who now gets apples in the kitchen just because they love apples, and I'd rather see bananas or citrus fruit.
well, I would say that it actually creates compassion for yourself. So
Mm.
when you start to lead from heart or lead from a place where you are actually asking or inviting that other person to see if they are open to actually meeting that need, they might not be able to do it. So then there's a second part to it. So you may have to teach them and going, because they may turn around and say, oh, sorry, I can't do that, which is another mindset piece. So, as a leader and in teams, you can start to build collaboration. You can start to build compassion. And so you could start with acknowledging, what that person is really good at, their style of leadership, which is different to yours. And really acknowledge that you love how they show up in this way. But then, equally, to get your needs met, you're just communicating back to them, going, my style is this. Would you be open to actually bringing this forward? Is this something that we could develop together? And so it's creating that communication flow. We're starting to open up creativity, and we're really just allowing people to be seen and heard, for who they are. Because everyone's different, Prosper, as you know. We all have, and it's being able to adapt to those diverse communication styles. But until we understand that about ourselves, you can then not understand in another. You can then see how it's showing up in another. Oh, that person has got similar values to me. Oh, they've got similar ideas to me. Oh, they're very similar to me. Okay, wonder when we're in a challenging situation, are they going to disintegrate like I disintegrate? Am I then going to become aware of how they disintegrate and then knowing those signs? So then that's how we can then lift up our teams, because in a happy times when the deals are going well and everything's all going, no one's telling us to get out of that state, are they? So it's being able to emotionally regulate that state, or knowing when that person is about to go off that state, and how much they've pushed themselves. And going back to the original piece, which I said around how we judge ourselves, we're pushing ourselves, we're striving, we're in this competitive world of AI, and everyone's trying to pivot and adapt, but we're not stopping to just become aware of what's really important for us and where do we want to place our attention. What is it we want to bring forward? How can we create together and help and support one another? It starts with helping ourselves.
I like that. You see, we first tackled the school system, Kim, and there's also society. I mean, you can't be operating in a vacuum, you know? When I first arrived in Australia, I heard one thing that still, first of all, makes me laugh, but I also am very cognizant of it. You know, it's called the tall poppy syndrome, you know,
Yeah,
where they literally nip you in the bud if you're either too happy or too excited about certain things. You know, they just bring you down a little bit to the right,
yeah.
nice height. Now, you've had a story where you'd had a secretary saying that she didn't like you because you were apparently too happy. What did that teach you about leadership and relationships?
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. This was 30 years ago, Prosper. And yeah, it was my secretary when I first sort of stepped into this second agency within corporate real estate. And I just noticed my secretary was not talking to me. And I was in a team with three other guys. And she just was ignoring me. And she was doing all the work for all the other guys. She wasn't very friendly towards me. And I'm thinking, my God, is there something that I've said? You know, have I done something to her? And so one night, it was Friday night drinks, and I decided to actually confront her. So I stepped into a little bit of, assertiveness, and I just sort of said, what's your problem with me? Like, what's wrong? You know, why are you so nasty to me, and why are you ignoring me? And she said, well, you're too pretty, you're too happy, you're friends with everyone, you're talking with everyone, you get on well with everyone. And I kind of went, and that's a problem. And so it was really funny at the time because we laugh about it because she even says, I hated Kim like this. And she shares this story because we're friends still 30 years later. But it was just funny how if I hadn't have confronted or asked the question, I would never have found out, why she was behaving the way she was. And so what it does go back to your point of the tall poppy syndrome. There is that, I suppose, label, but it's really just knowing, am I being kind? Am I coming from my heart? How am I, delivering my messages? How am I showing up? If that's very heartfelt and delivered in a way that you're caring for people, yeah, I think it's just others kind of working out, what is it for them really? Did she have a mindset that, she couldn't be happy or joyful at the time? Possibly. Maybe, she wasn't happy at the time. And so she had to take it out on me. But this is where the projections come from, our emotional projections and how we show up. So I suppose the point that I would make with that is don't take it personally, you know? Don't take
Mm.
it personally. Either ask the question if you feel confident enough to actually ask someone, have I done something to upset you? Because what we're constructing, Prosper, is meaning out of words. We're not actually getting to the bottom of the meaning for that person.
Now I'm intrigued. What was the relationship after that? Because that would have been like now she's caught, she no longer has anywhere to hide. Did she change or what? Did she just maintain her stance or did you change? What was the outcome with that whole scenario?
Yeah, I turned around and responded and I said, well, I'm a really nice person. Can we just get on? Can we just be friends? And so it was that stepping in, that pattern at the time, which was being over responsible by stepping in to try and build those relationships because that was really important for me. And
Mm.
yes, we still have an amazing relationship to this day, but it's a funny story that we laugh about. And so it's a story that's, yeah, been carrying for 30 years, which is really funny. So, yeah, she loved me from then on. And so she realized that I was a really genuine person.
Absolutely. Now, there's also something that I've also seen in the work that you do. It's not necessarily obviously the internal beats. There's also the externals, the shell, the packaging actually matters. Could you maybe walk us through what that entails and what you guys have been doing in that realm?
With the packaging, you said?
Obviously the way you show up, your dressing and things of that nature. It's one of those things that's also important. Yeah.
100%. And look, it's an interesting topic. So I value image and I value how I show up. And look, image can be, how should I say, described in different ways. It's not one fixed thing. And so it's about owning your own image. So I love your image because you've got this really cool, hip, sort of, really bright orange jacket, right? But, which is a different image to me. But it doesn't mean that it's any less or higher. It's just more about an image. And it's like, what is the brand that you're bringing forward? What is that level of brand that you're wanting to show up as? And mine is around, sort of high neck, dresses with jackets. I love the professional look. I love dressing up. It's probably one of the biggest pieces for me. And I value that image. And so, I don't project it onto others. I don't say that others have to dress a certain way. It's more about just owning your own style and how that shows up for you.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, somebody might be looking at this and say, I've already got all my certifications. I'm already an expert in what I'm doing. That's the reason why I'm sitting in this office, or that's the reason why I'm sitting behind this table. Why should anyone really go in and invest in emotional intelligence and communication skills now, and rather than wait until maybe they need them, or if it comes up at a seminar at some point?
Yeah, really great question. So something that I was actually introduced to, and I don't know whether you have heard of it, Prosper, is the fifth revolution. And it was interesting because I did a report last year which went back to the Industrial Revolution, and it talked about the left-hand side of the brain. And in my report, I wrote a piece, and I was very intrigued about the brain because I needed to understand how we were operating, and we were very task focused, and we're needing the balance of the right hand side of the brain, which is the emotional side that we seem to be suppressing because we're actually putting our emotions to the side. And part of that has evolved through, say, frameworks of family and schooling and in working careers where, someone might say to you, oh, look, something goes wrong in your life. You just got to pick yourself up and move on. Now it's just around how do we kind of emotionally regulate ourselves in a better way, in a healthier way? How do we process those emotions in a healthier way? And probably the biggest piece is, with the fifth revolution, which is coming through, which is being driven by AI, is three critical leadership skills that are at the forefront: psychological flexibility, emotional intelligence, and creative thinking. And so a lot of that has actually, I've noticed, is being suppressed because we haven't been able to get uncomfortable, to be able to look at those parts of those emotions, or even just tap into simple emotions on the surface, like I'm frustrated with this person. And then it really repivots back to, okay, so what are your needs? Oh, okay, I'm not really clear on that. Can you support me with understanding my needs? So that's probably the most basic piece to go to, is that psychological flexibility, when we can become adaptable to the diverse generational, there's so many different generational gaps that are going on within businesses, and there's so many different hierarchies that if we're able to become more adaptable to that, we've kind of been able to master our own PI, which is our personal intelligence. So we've understood our own leadership style, we've understood our communication style, and then the opportunity, Prosper, is, do we want flexibility in that? Do we want to be able to access another, part? And so I created this platform which has three sort of leadership styles: one which is the dominant leader, the avoidant leader, and the compassionate leader. And so let's just say, for argument's sake, you're a dominant leader. One aspect of that, in a really simple way, is you could actually look at taking on a role within a meeting for a week to actually become the avoidant leader. But communicate that in the way that you shift it and you basically hand the baton to someone else to actually lead that meeting, and you sit back, not necessarily in full avoidance, but you're just taking on a different role. And I'm just giving a simple connection in terms of the flexibility. Can you hand over from being the dominant leader to the avoidant leader and become the observer? So there's just little tips, to look at.
I like that. And so many people really need to be, cognizant of all of that. Now, where would people go to on the internet, Kim, to learn a little bit more about, the three types of leaders, like the avoidant, dominant, and also the compassionate leader?
So we've created an amazing platform which is called Suits You Facilitation. My co-creator Caroline Murphy and I created this, and it was basically we've created an awareness program which is helping you to bridge the gaps for success. So certain skills that you can look at to look at creating flexibility, look at adapting, look at it becoming aware. So all these opportunities to actually go, oh wow, you know, I am an avoidant leader, taking ownership, really looking at owning that style and then also then playing with something else. So that's where the platform sort of offers that piece.
Absolutely. And that'll be on your website, right? I've noticed that's on suitsyouFacilitation.com.au.
It's just .com. Yeah, so it's just
Oh, sorry,
.com.
.com. Yep. Okay, fantastic. I'll make sure that all those links are in the show notes below. Now, what you're literally doing is giving people back to themselves, especially the leaders, or being the mirror, in front of them so they can be able to reflect on who they are, especially because once somebody knows what they need to act on or be or show up as, it will be remiss for them to fall back to what they were before. You know what I mean? It's like somebody has a heart attack, right? Sorry to use that sort of example, but and then the doctor tells them, hey, if you eat better food,
Yeah.
you'd last a little bit longer, because if you have another one, you're probably not going to come back from this one. And what you guys are sort of giving is that pattern break for where people have just been leaders, but you're coming in and saying, hey, this is who you are, show up as more of this instead of trying to be that which you're not. Is that my understanding of what you guys have created here?
Yeah, it's very accurate. And so Caroline, my co-creator, she's come from a design background as well as she's an author and facilitator as well. And her background is actually looking at the designing. So, designing of your leadership style, how do we design it? How do we then adapt it? And we both combine skills where we are looking at the thought patterns, the thinking side of it, but then we equally also prosper and looking at the feeling because our bodies are holding the feeling. So, when we're driven by the feeling of something, we could be driven by the past rather than by the future. And so that's the part that we're wanting to support people in really going, okay, I get that our past experiences have created certain feelings, our past experiences have created certain thoughts. And so it's kind of combining that to actually go, how do we break both of those? How do we actually tie in both of those? Because we could say, oh, I'm amazing, right? Where you actually don't feel that. So then you go, how do we work on words that you can choose in order to build that confidence up? So, to become a confident leader or to build confidence is building knowledge within yourself. So, we're building the knowledge within the individual, helping them to design their leadership style, but helping them to equally adapt in chaos or challenging situations when the stakes are high. Like, where do you default to? And do you want to design it in a different way? So, yeah, that's the beauty of it. We get
I
to
love
choose
it.
our avatar.
I love it. And definitely, definitely, if you're watching this right now or you're listening to this and you're wondering, does this type of leadership, suit me? I encourage you to check out suitsyouFacilitation.com.au. Now, Kim, this has been wonderful. I mean, you took us from the time you were 17 and your journey sort of took another turn and you went on a mission to learn and be, do, and have all that you have now. But I just wanted to sort of maybe come back full circle again and obviously look at that 17-year-old girl who was told you would not amount to anything. If you could sit down with that younger version of yourself, what's the one thing you'd tell her that would completely just get her on her path, knowing what you know now about life?
Yeah, it's a great question. I love that. Keep believing in yourself and keep backing yourself.
Mm,
Finding people who will support you on that path. Yeah,
maybe.
it's
In my culture, we've got a statement: if you want to go far, you go alone, but if you want to go further, you go together. And I think that's exactly what you're saying. If you find the right people who have the right outlook in life, you can be, do, and have a happier existence. And I think you have shown that, and also with the partnership that you now have with Caroline and everybody else around you, really, really showcases that. But you did hint a little bit on the fifth revolution. So it will also be remiss for me to not ask what's next now that we know where you've been and things of that nature. What are you working on that we can be all excited about? Because it does look like this is only the beginning, isn't it?
it is. It is only a beginning. Um, well, I wrote a report last year, and it's something that I'm working on, which is I'm working on fast tracking development tools, and I've created a couple of tools which can actually get outcomes in this, fast-paced industry. Like in all of industries. And I've created a 10-minute tool and a 30-minute tool, which actually creates a KPI.
Mm.
And so it's helping people to become, aware of, how they're communicating, and how they're receiving messages. And so
Mm.
the biggest piece which I'm trying to diffuse, Prosper, is the triggers of the emotional charge. I'm trying to diffuse that. So when we become more aware of, you know, what is it that we're receiving? What is it that's causing that emotional charge? So yeah, these developmental tools are really wanting people to apply and integrate and learn knowledge to actually shift that, because we can, have healthier, more fulfilled lives. And yeah, it's probably one of the biggest pieces that I'm really excited about bringing forward.
Really, can't wait. What a conversation, Kim. I mean, seriously, this has been amazing because your life story and your experience have so much value because you've just shown us that leadership isn't just about your strategy or maybe KPIs. It's actually mastering the inner game. You know what I mean? It's
Mm,
actually mastering the inner game so you can lead with clarity, confidence, and care, and the rest just obviously takes care of itself.
It's
Thank you
exactly
so
it.
much for sharing this with us on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it as well. It was
Ab-
wonderful.
Absolutely. And for those that are watching right now, if you're watching up until now, well, thank you so much for tuning into the Online Prosperity Show. But if you know someone who's maybe leading a team, or maybe that's yourself, but might be feeling, like that dolphin in a tank full of sharks, like what Kim has alluded to, please share with them this episode because there's so many leaders that are just offered the opportunity to lead, but nobody really tells them what to do next. And the next
Mm.
best thing they should just basically do is look within, not to look, for answers in an SOP or things of that nature. And if somebody has shared this with you, be sure to subscribe to the Online Prosperity Show so you don't miss out on any of these valuable insights and content that we are sharing. Because next time on this particular show, we'll be talking about simple ideas that can actually help you create a happier existence, both in business and in life. Until next
Yeah.
time, bye for now.